Welcome. This short guide to winding down a business in times of crisis is done in partnership with Davis Law, Hortensia Law, and Elevate Hennepin, a business support initiative with Hennepin County. Please welcome our presenters, Miluska and Davis.
Thank you so much, Lily. It's great to be here today to talk about winding up an LLC because it can be a process that seems very complicated, but it doesn't have to be. Davis, tell us a little bit about the easier ways to shut off a business.
Yes. So the nice thing about Minnesota law is that we have very detailed and pretty formal ways to, if a business owner has decided for whatever reason that they need to close their business, or if their cash situation is such that they must close their business if they can't, pay their debts in a timely manner. Minnesota law has a very nice structure set out that doesn't always require that a business go through a formal bankruptcy, which is something that a lot of folks worry about. It has a structure of here's how you notify any creditors you may have. Here's how you tell the Secretary of State and the state of Minnesota that you're intending to shut down. And here's a step-by-step process of how that works. So it's really, Minnesota companies are fortunate in that when and if it comes time to possibly close a business, there's a pretty laid out formal way to do so. And the first thing you'll want to do if you're thinking about that is gather the information listed here. Payroll information. If you have employees, you'll want to find your payroll documents. You'll want all tax documents from the last year, probably your tax returns, any estimated tax payments that have been made. If you're in a lease, you'll want to look at that. And then any loan documents. Anyone you owe money, anyone the company owes money to is someone that's going to need a notice about this shutting down. So both secured loans where they have an interest in possibly your inventory or your business building, and unsecured loans, possibly payroll, Stripe loans, PayPal loans, anything that isn't secured by assets. Some idle loans from the pandemic may not be secured. So, but you'll want to gather that information and be able to provide that to anyone who's advising you. And then you definitely want to look at guarantees, personal guarantees that switch the liability for the payment from solely the business to you as an owner as well. And then the balance sheet and profit and loss statement, you can generally get those from whoever's doing your books, and a 10-week cash flow plan to kind of forecast out how are we going to use the remaining assets as we're winding things down. I'll hand it back to you, Miluska.
Thank you. And then you have a wonderful resource on Elevate Hennepin, because despite the fact that, as Davis said, it is a very structured and helpful method of closing an LLC in Minnesota, there's still some stress and there's still some likely regret and worry. And so being able to join with a team of advisors that will help you find the resources you need and the decision and structured ways of finding the best alternatives and getting to a decision would be very helpful. And Elevate Hennepin has a set of consultants that can help you legally, like Davis and me, and we have a very deep bench of lawyers that can assist. The message that you're going to be giving your customers, employees, and other constituencies can be managed in an orderly way through our PR consultants. There's definitely additional help with the books and the finances if you need them. And that's pretty much how you decide. Once you've gathered all the information and you've consulted with your team and your trusted advisors, whether you want to open and close, and then is when you begin preparing and revising your checklist and timeline, because there's going to be things that you're going to forget at the beginning that will come up as you gather the information. And as David said, one of the most important things is the creditor list. So Davis, what are the more structured ways in which we can think of gathering documents?
Yeah. So you brought up an excellent point there that you're going to want to consult with someone, and Elevate is a perfect place to find all the consultants you might need before you 100% decide that you're closing, because there may be a way through what seems like, an insurmountable situation with your business. So consult with your with advisors. You'll probably want to talk to an attorney. You'll want to talk to an accountant or an advisor, a financial advisor, someone who can help you see, is this a momentary issue or is it, an ongoing issue? And then you'll want to look into, these are kind of the big areas of places you'll need to notify and things you'll want to be sure you know about. We talked before about debt of the company debt, and personal guarantees that have been possibly made, which shift the debt from being solely the company's. So company debt is debt that once we've kind of notified creditors and done things the right way, that debt will go away when the company does. But debt that's been personally guaranteed by the owners, that's certainly debt that you're going to need to speak with the creditors, see if there's a way to, settle it for less than it was, or enter into some sort of an agreement that kind of takes care of your guarantee. And that's where your advisors can really help. You'll want to evaluate bankruptcy options. Most smaller businesses won't have to do a full business bankruptcy, but some may, depending on the situation. And so again, your advisors can help you figure out, hey, can we do this just through the state statutes, or do we need to fully go through a business bankruptcy process? And then equipment debt and real estate debt. If you own your building, and if you purchased it either with a mortgage or a contract for deed, if you didn't just pay cash for the amount, you'll have someone to notify. With a mortgage, you generally want to let them know, hey, we may be shutting the business down. We owe X amount. The building's worth Y amount. Do we need to talk about, what's going to happen if the amount the building's worth is less than the mortgage? Or what's going to happen if it's more? Do we need to arrange a sale? With a contract for deed, you may be in a situation, depending on the terms, where if you stop paying, the property reverts back to the seller, or the seller has a right to revert it back. So that's something you definitely want to examine and fully understand with your advisors. And equipment debt, if you have equipment in your business, if you have sometimes even inventory, you may have those creditors who you owe for those things probably have a UCC filing, UCC1 filing, and you can find those at the Secretary of State in Minnesota if they were registered in Minnesota, and you can, you can figure out who holds these UCC filings, who has an interest, and then you and your advisor can kind of work together to say, okay, let's notify these people. Many times it'll be a matter of them taking the equipment back because they have a right because of the UCC filing. But sometimes you may have, more senior creditors or folks who are in line in front of them. So it's a matter of figuring out what it all is so that then you can give the proper notification to all of those creditors. Do you want to talk about leases, Miluska?
Sure. Many of our business owners, as Davis mentioned, already own the property where they run their business, but some some of us lease from a landlord, and many times we have a 5 to 10 year lease that is a debt and that needs to be paid. So the fact that our business closes in most commercial leases does not get us off the hook, particularly because we usually have a guarantee back in the lease. And so it is very important to negotiate with the landlord depending on your plan of closing your business. Um, Perhaps making a certain amount of payments so that they let the lease expire and release the guarantee, making sure that you are surrendering the premises in excellent shape so that there's no claims against you. Um, for a space that has been left damaged, and the landlord knows that you're closing. So if there is not a personal guarantee on the lease, it can be terminated. If there is, there are ways to negotiate options, and that is another reason to call um, an attorney. And then dealing with the IRS and Minnesota Revenue does not have to be terribly um, overwhelming. There are ways to do it in orderly ways. Davis, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So these are probably the two most important people, the two most important organizations to notify. I mean, besides your creditors and your landlord, you really want to let the IRS and Minnesota Revenue know, don't expect additional filings from this company. If you don't tell them kind of this is the end, this is the last each filing that you have, they're going to continue expecting to see your filings. And when they don't get your filings in a timely manner as you used to, there can be penalties that attach and things like that. So as you're deciding to wind things up, you pay out your employees and payments to contract workers. And you want to make sure those are all documented. You may be winding your business up and shutting it down, not specifically at the end of a calendar year. You might be doing it. So you want to work with a tax advisor for when do we have to file these things, the 1099s for the contract workers, the W-2 for the employees. And then you want to file your final state and federal returns for the company. And you want to let them know. I know that accountants I've worked with in the past often have a statement that they put. Part of it is, final return. I believe there's a box you can check on many of the forms to say, hey, this is it. This is our final one. You want to set aside and have enough money to pay any final taxes that you have, or if that's not possible, to negotiate a payment plan or an offering compromise or one of any things that can be negotiated with either the state or the federal departments of revenue. But you'll want an advisor to help advise you on that. What are we going to ask them for? What are we going to tell them? And then you want to make sure that the employer identification number, which is kind of like the business's own social security number, is canceled so that no one can possibly use it for who knows what, and that your accounts are closed. Bank accounts, your IRS account, every business, every individual has an account. You want to make sure that's shut down. If you have a Minnesota state ID, which is similar to your EIN, you want to make sure that's closed. And if you had workers' comp accounts or unemployment accounts, make sure those are closed as well. And then you just keep those records. Your accountant will probably advise you, or your tax advisor, to keep them for about 7 years. That's kind of a good rule. If anything comes up, you'll have them. But it's pretty rare for anything to come up. Once you shut down in the way that you need to and notify the appropriate parties, generally nothing comes up after that. Miluska, tell us about the statement, the very first thing that is filed.
Thank you, Davis. The statement of dissolution is the first in the two-step process. So you have to tell the Secretary of State that you're shutting down the company, and then you have to tell them that you're really, really shutting down the company. And the process begins with a resolution in writing by the members. I like to make it to definitely do a meeting, but either do a written resolution that everybody signs, or do very, very careful minutes so that we have something solid to base the process that we're going to undertake. And then we file a statement of dissolution with the Secretary of State, which pretty much just tells them this is the name of the company, and this is and we're closing down. We are dissolving the LLC based on the resolution of the member or the members. And then we start the process of winding up the activities of the organization. Davis, can you tell us a little bit more about the two statutes that help us do that?
Yes. So Minnesota statutes 322C, 0.703 and 0.704. So 322C is our newer LLC statute. And those statutes they lay out exactly what you need to do. As Miluska talks about, you have a resolution of the company, which if it's a single member LLC, it's just kind of you telling the company, hey, we're shutting down now. We approve that. You file the statement of dissolution. And then the second step is filing the statement of termination. And these two statutes set out kind of what you have to do prior to filing those statements and what you have to do kind of in between. And really, it's really laying out, here's how much time your creditors need as you send them this notice before their claims may be barred. So you send out a notice to your creditors and say, hey, we think we owe you money. We're shutting this company down in accordance with these statutes. You need to tell us how much you think we owe you. And I believe it's a 30-day period. But it's a pretty short window. The statutes don't have you kind of waiting out there for, half a year, a whole quarter. And then many claims are barred, but not all of them from sending the appropriate notice. And then once the waiting period has passed, you've fulfilled all the requirements of the statutes, then you can file this statement of termination, which basically you can think about it as the statement of dissolution starts the winding up and closing process. The statement of termination kind of finishes it. And the Secretary of State will look to make sure that you're telling them, hey, we've done all the things the statutes require. Dissolve our business, take it kind of out of the record at the Secretary of State, and let us shut down. And sometimes they'll get back to you in between the statement of dissolution and termination, and they might need additional information but for the most part, it's a pretty streamlined process. The statutes are really clear about what you need to file, and as long as you're working with advisors, they're going to know kind of specifically what needs to happen in what order.
And that's it. As you can see, very simple, very straightforward. And I realized that there's anxiety with closing a business. But Davis, we've seen entrepreneurs who closed a business and then that experience allowed them to grow into something even better, right?
Absolutely. Just because you're closing, a lot of people think, well, if I have to close a business, if I have a business that quote unquote failed, that's it. I can't ever do anything again. And that's absolutely not true. There may be some creditors that you borrowed from that you may be barred from borrowing from them for a particular period of time if, there was an amount of money written off. There may be certain things, but you can shut down one business, and you can open a new business kind of as soon as you want, because those two businesses will have nothing, there will be no kind of trail of, there's no, the statutes and the state and the Secretary of State, there should be no stigma in, hey, this business for whatever reason didn't make it, or we weren't able to keep it open. You can absolutely start something new. You can absolutely, start something similar that's just maybe set up for success a little better, or learns from the previous things that happened, or doesn't need to live through pandemics and other, once in a lifetime situations. So I know a lot of folks, it feels very heavy, but I think also once business owners make a decision to shut something down, sometimes they feel really relieved. That's been my experience with them. Yeah, so that's really all there is to it.
And you have helped throughout the way. Lily, tell us more
Yeah.
about Elevate Hennepin.
Well, thank you, Davis and Miluska, for your insight and guidance. It's so helpful. And so please visit Elevate Hennepin for access to the vetted resources that Miluska and Davis mentioned. You can get no cost one-on-one advising with both Miluska and Davis for no cost. You can also get a series of no-cost cohort programming or group learning. And we have business navigators that can help very quickly guide you to your next step. So join us at elevatehennepin.org and start accessing all the services you need. Thank you so much.